Beloved child. There is a message that was never meant to disappear, yet it was never meant to reach you this soon. Someone carried these words in silence for far too long, believing they would remain hidden forever. But tonight, something has changed. The weight of unspoken emotions has become too heavy to carry, and what was once locked away has finally found its way toward you. Before this moment slips away, listen with an open heart. Because this story may leave you questioning everything you thought you knew. Listen carefully. For a very long time, your soulmate convinced themselves that silence was the safest choice. They believed that speaking from the heart would only create more pain, more misunderstandings, and more distance between the two of you. Every time your name crossed their mind, they swallowed the words they wanted to say. Every memory became another page in a story they thought would never have another chapter. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and those months slowly became years of pretending that everything was fine when, deep inside, nothing truly was. They smiled in front of others, but their heart carried a quiet sadness that nobody seemed to notice. Friends believed they had moved on. Family assumed they had accepted the past. Even the people closest to them never realized that every peaceful moment they experienced was interrupted by one familiar thought, you. They hid that truth so well that eventually everyone stopped asking questions. But hiding a feeling does not erase it. Sometimes the deepest emotions only grow stronger in silence. There were countless nights when they reached for their phone, typed your name, stared at an empty message box, and then quietly deleted every single word before pressing send. Not because they had nothing to say, but because they feared they had already lost the right to say it. They wondered if you would ignore them. If you had already built a happier life. Or if hearing from them would only reopen wounds that had barely begun to heal. Fear became stronger than hope, and so the message remained unsent. Don't skip this story, because what happened next changed everything. One evening, while looking through an old drawer they had promised themselves never to open again, they discovered something unexpected. It was not expensive. It was not glamorous. It was simply a forgotten reminder of a moment that meant everything to them. The instant they held it in their hands, every wall they had spent years building around their heart began to fall apart. Suddenly, memories returned with incredible clarity, the laughter, the promises, the dreams that once felt unbreakable, and the future they had quietly imagined with you. For the first time in a very long while, they stopped asking themselves whether you still remembered them. Instead, they asked a far more painful question: what if I never tell them the truth? That single thought echoed through their mind again and again until it became impossible to ignore. Regret has a strange way of growing louder the longer it is left unanswered. That night they sat alone, staring at a blank screen. They promised themselves there would be no more excuses, no more fear, and no more pretending. They began writing the most honest message they had ever written in their life. Every sentence came directly from the heart. There were no games, no pride, and no attempt to change the past. Only truth. The kind of truth that many people wait an entire lifetime to say but never do. As the message grew longer, tears quietly filled their eyes. They admitted mistakes they had never confessed to anyone. They spoke about the moments they wished they could relive, the words they wished they had spoken sooner, and the silence they wished they had broken years ago. Every line carried the weight of memories they had hidden from the world. It was not a message asking for sympathy. It was a message asking for one chance to finally be understood. Don't skip. Because the next decision would determine whether this message would ever reach you. Their finger slowly moved toward the send button. Their heart raced faster than ever before. One tap could change everything. Or change nothing at all. They closed their eyes, whispered your name under their breath, and prepared to make the decision they had feared for so long. But just as they were about to press send, something completely unexpected appeared on the screen. And in a single moment, everything changed. The unexpected notification froze them completely. For a few long seconds, they could not breathe. Their finger remained suspended above the screen while their heart pounded louder than the silence around them. They had waited so long to tell you the truth, yet now, at the very moment they were finally ready, it felt as though life itself was asking them one final question: are you absolutely certain? The notification was not dramatic. It was only a simple reminder from an old photo application, displaying a memory captured years ago. But that single photograph carried more emotion than they could have imagined. It showed a moment when both of you were smiling without fear, without confusion, and without the walls that later separated your lives. Looking at that image made them realize something they had refused to admit for far too long. The happiest version of themselves had existed during the time they shared with you, and no matter how much they tried to replace those memories, nothing ever truly filled that empty space. They lowered the phone and quietly whispered, "Maybe this isn't a coincidence." It felt as though life had placed that forgotten memory in front of them for a reason. Every excuse they had been holding onto suddenly sounded meaningless. Pride no longer mattered. Fear no longer mattered. The opinions of other people no longer mattered. Only one thing remained important: to finally let you know what had been hidden inside their heart all this time. Don't skip this story, because the message they were about to send was unlike anything they had ever written before. They erased every formal sentence they had prepared earlier and started again from the beginning. This time they wrote exactly what they felt. I don't know if you will ever read this. I don't know if you still remember me the way I remember you. Maybe life has already taken us in different directions, and maybe you found happiness without me. If that's true, I genuinely hope your days are filled with peace. But before I let another year pass, I need you to know something I should have said a long time ago. They paused, wiped away another tear, and continued typing. I was never angry with you as much as I was disappointed in myself. I kept blaming circumstances because it was easier than admitting I was afraid. Afraid of losing you. Afraid of saying the wrong thing. Afraid that loving someone so deeply could also become the greatest source of pain. Instead of fighting for us, I stayed silent. And that silence became the biggest mistake of my life. Every word felt lighter than the one before, as though years of emotional weight were slowly leaving their heart. For the first time in a very long while, they felt honest with themselves. They were no longer trying to rewrite history. They were simply accepting it. As they reached the final lines, they stopped again. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect another chance. I don't even expect a reply. I only hope that one day, if this message reaches you, you'll know there was always someone who never truly stopped caring. Those last words stayed on the screen while they stared at them for several minutes. They wondered if those sentences were enough. Could a few paragraphs really carry years of unspoken emotion? Could one message ever explain thousands of sleepless nights, endless regrets, and every moment they wished they had chosen courage instead of fear? Don't skip. Because what happened next was something they never expected. Just as they gathered the courage to press send, another message appeared, but this one wasn't from an app or an old memory. It was from someone they hadn't spoken to in years. The preview of that message contained only 7 words. I finally found the truth about what happened. The moment they read those words, every question they had buried inside their heart came rushing back at once. And they immediately realized that the story separating you both was far from over. They stared at those 7 words over and over again. I finally found the truth about what happened. For several long moments, they couldn't bring themselves to open the message. Their hands trembled as 1,000 possibilities raced through their mind. What truth? Why now? And why had it taken so many years for someone to finally speak? Taking a deep breath, they tapped the screen. The message was longer than they expected. I know this may be difficult to believe, but you deserve to know the truth. What happened between you and them was never the full story. There were conversations you never heard, decisions made without your knowledge, and words that were changed before they ever reached you. I stayed silent because I thought it was protecting everyone. But now I realize my silence only caused more pain. I'm sorry. Their heartbeat grew faster with every sentence. They continued reading. Years ago, there was a message meant for you. It was never delivered. Someone convinced me that keeping you apart was the best choice. They said you would both move on and eventually forget each other. I believed them. And I have regretted that decision every single day since. The phone nearly slipped from their hand. Everything they had believed for years suddenly felt uncertain. They had blamed themselves. They had blamed you. They had blamed bad timing. But what if the distance between you had been created by someone else's decision? Don't skip this story. Because the next discovery changed the meaning of every memory they had. Without wasting another second, they searched through old emails, forgotten folders, and backed up conversations they hadn't opened in years. Most of it was meaningless. Random pictures. Old receipts. Conversations with friends. Then they found a folder with a date they immediately recognized. Their heart stopped. Inside was a draft. Never sent. The timestamp matched the exact week everything had fallen apart. Slowly, they opened it. Every line felt like a voice speaking from the past. If you're reading this, then somehow my words finally reached you. I never wanted us to end like this. I wanted to explain everything, but every time I tried, something got in the way. If one day you ever wonder whether you mattered to me, the answer has always been yes. Tears filled their eyes before they could finish reading. This wasn't written yesterday. It wasn't written last month. It had been waiting there for years. Hidden in silence. For the first time, they understood that not every goodbye is spoken willingly. Sometimes people lose each other because fear, misunderstanding, and outside interference become louder than love itself. They closed their eyes and whispered your name. I wish you had known. They weren't asking for the past to return anymore. They weren't trying to erase every painful memory. They simply wished the truth had arrived sooner. Don't skip. Because one final decision remained. They looked at the emotional message they had just finished writing for you. Then they looked at the forgotten draft from years ago. For a long time, they couldn't decide which one should be sent. The message from the past. Or the message from today. Finally, they made a choice. With tears in their eyes, they combined both messages into one. The past would finally meet the present. They pressed the send button. The screen showed only one word. Sending. Seconds passed. No confirmation appeared. Instead, the phone suddenly displayed an unexpected notification that made their face turn completely pale. Message delivery failed. Recipient unavailable. In that heartbreaking moment, they realized the journey to reach you was not over yet. And someone, or something, was still standing between the truth and the person who was always meant to hear it. The words message delivery failed. Recipient unavailable. Remained on the screen like a sentence they refused to accept. For a few moments, they simply stared at it, hoping it would disappear if they waited long enough. They refreshed the screen. They checked the contact again. They even convinced themselves it must be a temporary network problem. But every attempt ended exactly the same way. The message would not go through. A strange silence filled the room. It wasn't the silence of giving up. It was the silence that comes just before someone makes the biggest decision of their life. They slowly stood up, walked toward the window, and looked out into the darkness. For years they had believed that fate had closed every door between the two of you. Yet tonight, after discovering the forgotten truth, they could no longer accept that explanation. If one path was blocked, they would find another. Don't skip this story. Because the next step was something they had promised themselves they would never do again. They opened an old notebook hidden inside a wooden box. Between its pages were names, dates, and places connected to a chapter of life they had tried so hard to forget. Every page carried memories that still felt painfully alive. In the middle of the notebook was one address they recognized immediately. They whispered softly, "If I can't reach them with a message, maybe I have to follow the place where everything truly began." The thought terrified them. Returning there meant facing every regret they had spent years trying to bury. It meant walking through streets where every corner held a memory. It meant risking another heartbreak if they discovered that life had moved on without them. Yet something deep inside refused to let the story end with an undelivered message. The following morning, they packed almost nothing. This wasn't a journey planned with logic. It was a journey led entirely by the heart. Before leaving, they looked at the emotional message one last time. Instead of deleting it, they saved it with a new title. "For the day our paths finally cross again." Those words gave them just enough strength to walk out the door. Hours later, after a long drive filled with silence, familiar roads slowly began to appear. Every mile brought back another memory they had tried to forget. They remembered the laughter, the dreams, the promises, and even the painful goodbye that had never truly made sense. As they reached the town, everything looked different, yet strangely familiar. Some buildings had changed. Some shops had disappeared. But one place remained exactly as they remembered. It was the quiet park where the two of you had once shared a conversation that neither of you imagined would become your last. Don't skip. Because what they found there changed everything once again. They walked slowly toward the old wooden bench. For a moment, it seemed completely empty. Then they noticed something unusual. Tucked carefully beneath the bench was a small envelope, protected inside a clear plastic cover as if someone wanted it to survive the passing years. Their heartbeat became uncontrollable. The envelope had no stamp, no address. Only two handwritten words on the front. "For you." Their hands shook as they carefully picked it up. The handwriting looked hauntingly familiar. It was a style they could never forget. With tears forming in their eyes, they slowly opened the envelope. But before they could read the first line, they heard gentle footsteps approaching from behind. Someone quietly spoke their name. The voice sounded impossibly familiar. A voice they had not heard in years. And in that single moment, they realized the message they had spent so long trying to send was no longer the biggest surprise waiting for them. The moment they heard their name, time seemed to stop. They didn't turn around immediately. Some part of them was afraid that if they moved too quickly, the voice would disappear like so many dreams before it. Their fingers tightened around the old envelope while their heart beat louder than the wind passing through the trees. Slowly, almost afraid to breathe, they turned. Standing only a few steps away was someone they had never expected to see again. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. No dramatic words. No sudden embrace. Only silence. The kind of silence that carries years of unanswered questions. Their eyes searched each other's faces, trying to recognize the people time had changed while still finding the familiar soul they had never truly forgotten. Finally, the stranger smiled gently. "I wasn't sure you would come." Those simple words felt heavier than anything else they had heard that night. Your soulmate could barely find their voice. "You knew I would be here?" The stranger nodded. "I didn't know for certain. But I hoped that one day the truth would become stronger than the silence." Don't skip this story, because the envelope you are about to hear about had been waiting much longer than anyone imagined. The stranger pointed toward the letter still resting in trembling hands. "Open it." With shaking fingers, your soulmate unfolded the faded paper. The ink had become slightly lighter with time, but every word was still readable. The first sentence changed everything. "If you're reading this, it means the truth finally found its way back to you." They swallowed hard and continued. "There were people who believed keeping you apart was an act of kindness. They thought distance would protect both of you from future pain. But they never understood that silence creates wounds no one can see." Another tear landed on the paper. The letter continued. "Neither of you failed each other the way you were told. You both made decisions based on incomplete truths. By the time the real story could have been told, too much time had passed. And everyone became afraid to admit what had really happened." Your soulmate closed their eyes. For years they had carried guilt that never truly belonged to them. Not because they had been perfect. Not because mistakes hadn't been made. But because the biggest decision of their life had been shaped by secrets they never had the chance to question. The stranger quietly spoke again. "I carried that letter longer than I should have. I wanted to deliver it years ago. But every time I tried, someone convinced me it would only reopen old wounds." They lowered their head. "I've regretted that decision every single day." Your soulmate looked up. There was no anger. Only sadness. Because they finally understood that regret had not belonged to just one person. It had lived inside many hearts. Don't skip. Because the next discovery was even more unbelievable. As they carefully folded the letter, something small slipped from between the pages and fell onto the wooden bench. It was an old photograph. The edges were worn. The colors had faded. But the memory inside remained untouched. On the back of the photograph, someone had written a single sentence years earlier. "When the right time comes, let this picture remind them that love was always real." Your soulmate held the photograph close to their heart. In that instant, they made a promise. No more unanswered questions. No more hidden messages. No more allowing fear to speak louder than truth. If there was even the smallest chance that this story could finally reach the person it had always been meant for, they would take it. Just as they slipped the photograph into their pocket, a phone vibrated. It wasn't theirs. It belonged to the stranger. The stranger looked at the screen. Their expression instantly changed. Without saying a word, they slowly turned the phone around. On the display was a brand new message from an unknown number. Only one sentence appeared. "It's too late. They already know everything." The stranger's face turned pale. Your soulmate felt a chill run through their entire body. Because they suddenly realized someone else had been watching this story unfold from the very beginning. The words, "It's too late. They already know everything," echoed in complete silence. Neither your soulmate nor the stranger spoke for several moments. The air suddenly felt heavier. Who had sent the message? What exactly did they mean? And most importantly, what did they already know everything really mean? The stranger immediately tried calling the unknown number, but the call failed before it could even begin. Another attempt ended the same way. Within seconds, the number disappeared completely, as if it had never existed. Your soulmate looked down at the old photograph still resting in their hand. For years, they had searched for answers. Tonight, they had finally found them. But now another mystery had appeared. The stranger quietly smiled. "I don't think that message was meant to stop you." Your soulmate looked confused. "What do you mean?" The stranger gently replied.